We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
with global pals. It's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Everything Theater podcast, the podcast where we talk about
everything theater. And boy, are we excited to be back here, back with you. Such a busy summer. Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs. Yes, thanks for your patience, everybody. I know it's been 3 weeks since we've posted, but
yeah, but explain why, Ellen. Come on.
Yes, we've got a new addition to the Everything Theater podcast fan base. Stephanie, my 2-week-old daughter, is here and healthy, and we're all doing good. And hopefully she's not giving her dad a hard time while we record this right now.
And I have to tell you, I have had the pleasure of seeing her. I thought it was a little longer because, listen, adults for lunch go and have ice cream, right? Isn't that what adults do? Yep. So I went to go get some ice cream for lunch, and there was Ellen with the whole family and Stephanie, everybody having lunch, and her older daughter eating the ice cream all over. It was, she was doing sort of like her own, like op art.
Yes.
But the baby is beautiful, just beautiful. It was.
Well, thank you.
The most, ice cream is good, but this was more delicious than anything to see you all. So, right, you've got your sitter at home, and we've got a wonderful guest who knows about little ones, has a 4-month-old at home himself. And I don't know how you tore yourself away to come to Saratoga to direct Saratoga. There it is, Saratoga Shakespeare Company. Wesley, you pronounce Broulik, right?
It's Broulik.
Broulik.
It's Broulik. Yep.
You're the one that we talked about dogs and babies before we started, and the old reporter and me would have double checked that, but the baby stuff was just too much fun. Wesley, thanks for joining us. Let me give you a quick intro. Listen, if there is something that can be done in theater, Wesley has done it. That's the bottom line. And now, so he directed here for Shakespeare this summer to a wonderful, wonderful reviews. It was just a short run, and now you're directing Macbeth with Times Fool Company, and that's in your neck of the woods, Connecticut.
Yes, that's true. So in fact, I finished up rehearsal, and we had a puppet workshop tonight because we're doing these really. I don't know if you've ever seen brown paper puppets. Geyer and Gimbel, they're really, you can make them out of brown paper, but so the murder of child Macduff, I didn't want to actually murder a child on stage. And it's important to the plot, right? Like, it's important that we see the monster that Macbeth becomes. Richard III murders children. They don't do it themselves. They ask someone else to do it. But we have to keep it in for the development, I guess, of a monster. And, being a parent, I know that my spouse and I, if something's harmful to children, we just turn it off right away. So I thought, let's do it with puppets. So we had a puppeteer in tonight, workshopping and developing and kind of research and developing how that will play out. And I think it might be actually more horrifying because we're going to have the murderers, not to give it away, but we're going to have them shred the puppet with their bare hands and tear the paper apart. Oh. And that will probably be more horrible than anything you could leave to the imagination.
Wesley, where did you come up with that?
I don't
what
know.
are your dreams like, Wesley?
They're not. I don't really. I sleep really soundly. I don't wake up with these things. It's part of it is I daydream. I walk about and I think about the script, and I'm driving or in the gym or in the shower or mowing the yard. That's a great time to think about scripts or shoveling snow. And, it bothered me from the beginning because my spouse and I, we have a very hard rule about, we just are really turned off when we see children being harmed or stories about harming children. But in Macbeth, you can't sugarcoat that. And there's been debate, some people are like, well, Wesley, you have to do it. And I was like, well, if we do it this way, there might be a little bit of artistic distance so we can process the inhumanity of it. And it might actually be more horrific, right? When you look at the narrative potential of a puppet, and frequently when people work with puppets, they attribute things like innocence to them, right? puppets and clowns tend to have like, they feel one emotion and they seem very toddler-like. And so in that, I think that there is something even more horrifying by doing it that way, and allows some wonderful narrative potential and theatricality that hopefully, because here's the problem. We also, not a problem, it's a great thing. For this audience, it's a lot of young people and kids. And I just think that murdering a child on stage would be too much. So that was a theatrical solution to the problem I felt that was before us. So that's where I came up with that.
Let me ask, you are your Actors Equity, your SAG-AFTRA, your Dramatists Guild. You're also within the Shakespeare Theater Association.
Yeah.
That, what you're doing this summer, and then what you just said, a young audience. Ellen and I have had many guests on, and I'm sure you've been engaged in conversations along these lines, Wesley. How does theater cultivate a young audience? Because otherwise we're there with the one oar that's not long enough. So how is it that what is it about Shakespeare that's attracting a young audience?
I think, at least in the ways that I like, particularly with Times Fool, the company is, for lack of a better way of describing it, we cast very diversely, and the company is at least 50% BIPOC, AAPI, South Asian. Like it is a very diverse, Afro-Latin, like it is a very diverse company. I invite actors to work within their own idealects, right? So I don't want you to change your Puerto Ricanness. I want you to embrace that and lean into that. Because it's if you look at even like with dialects, at any given time in Shakespeare's company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men or the King's Men, there were 6 to 7 different dialects being spoken among the 15 to 16 of them. So when we think that there's a sound or a way things have to be said, I said, no, they were speaking in their own voices, right? Also, part of what we do is I try to make it feel contemporary. And, not every show I direct to Shakespeare is this way, but when you realize that in Shakespeare's company, they wore their clothes, their fancy clothes, to the theater, they would bequeath them in their wills. They weren't trying to look, you'll see companies and they'll do this like faux Elizabethan look, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's trying to do a museum recreation of something, in my perspective, right? And so for me, I'm much more interested in much more contemporary looks. And when you also realize that the way they were making theater, Richard III has 51 characters in it, but they did it with a company of 15 to 16. So they're making big, bold choices, big, bold character choices, highly, highly theatrical. And when I was at the Blackfriars Theater Conference and I listened to a paper, this is why I go to these things, because I learn stuff. And this brilliant person talked about how songwriters at the time would pay Shakespeare's company to put their contemporary pop songs into play, and they could sell the sheet music. And so, while I didn't do that with much ado this summer, because it was very much rooted in early 1900s, World War I, I frequently will put contemporary music in the shows, right? And I'll do it acoustically, or I'll do it something like that. And part of that is just because that's in the spirit, in the je ne sais quoi, of what they would have done in Shakespeare's time. And I think it lets the plays sing. It makes them translatable. It makes them relatable. And it means we're not taking ourselves too seriously when you can work in, a top 4, a current hit, and deconstruct it and reconstruct it for the show. We recognize that and we see how it fits that moment emotionally, and for the narrative story that's taking place. So for me, I do those things, and I think that's a way to take it out of being museum pieces. And it's fun. It's fun. It's fun. What we do is fun. And I think if we're not having fun, that's part of the problem. But most of us were abused by Shakespeare teachers at some point.
Yeah.
Like, everyone raise your hand right now and saying, I had to sit through a terrible class of things I didn't understand. And part of it is, and I'm gonna irk off a lot of people when I say this, but plays are not meant to be read. They're meant to be shared live in front of us. And I think if we try to make Shakespeare literature, we're doing it a disservice, and we need to get it up on its feet. And that's part of the issue. And also we see deadly Shakespeare all the time. And for some reason we accept it still as something acceptable, and we can be better.
Yeah, the funny thing about Shakespeare is, everybody thinks it's all la-di-da, when in fact it was the opposite.
It was Michael Bay, Transformers 3. They were not trying to make high art. They were trying to put butts in seats and make something cool. And I think that if you set about to make something cool and fun that you actually want to watch, you'll be better served. And part of it also is, I'm gonna also say it's about access, right? Like the company that I'm working with now, Times Fool, they don't charge for admission at all, and neither does Saratoga Shakes. And I fear that the theater is pricing ourselves out of being something that we can go to on the reg. And a movie is cheaper. A minor league baseball game is cheaper. I can go see the Wolfpack here in Hartford for far less than I can go see a show at Hartford Stage, right? And I can get 2 tickets for the cost of 1 ticket to Hartford Stage. And that's not to get through any shade at Hartford Stage. That's not it at all. Outdoor Shakespeare, the overhead's a lot lower. You're not paying for a space. I get it. But I just think we can do better, because if it's not something that people can make a regular habit of, they never will, right? If we make it something that we have to dress up and be fancy for, as opposed to something we just do on a Friday night, hey, what's playing, like you do a movie, or to hear what bands are playing at your local bar. If we can normalize it in that way, then it's just better for everybody, right? And that's that's the thing that we have to figure out as theaters are emerging from COVID, that if we want to matter, we have to be accessible to people. And I think for me, as a theater maker, if we can find ways to lower or remove the cost, that's step 1, right? Step 2 is for young people to see themselves reflected on that stage in a variety of ways. And I think if we do that, then we're getting somewhere.
So can you speak to Saratoga Shakes or Times Fool of that very delicate balance of making it accessible and affordable to all people, but also sustaining the theater and being able to pay all the artists and designers and crew and all that? Are there any little tricks that you know of, or thoughts that you have?
I write a lot of grants. I also believe that a theater needs to belong to the community. I'd rather have 1,000 people give me $10 than one person write me one big check, right? Because then people feel like they have ownership of it, right? They feel like it belongs to them, and you reach a much wider audience, right? When you look at how the Guthrie, I don't know if you ever read Tyrone Guthrie's book, A New Theater, which it's not new anymore because it's like how old, right? But how that guy built that theater was astounding, because they didn't have the money for it, right? He had a little bit of money. And what he did is he recorded 45s of Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy, the folks that were going to be in that first season, and had them record speeches on little 45s. And then he reached out and got all these folks, like these little women's clubs and all those organizations and chambers and moose lodges, all these folks, to play these 45s to raise money. And there's photos of these, of letters to the Guthrie of school children, right? Saving their bottled money, right? From returning cans or their lunch money, and sending it $5 into the Guthrie to help build the Guthrie. And that's why the Guthrie belongs to the state of Minnesota, right? That's why it belongs to the Twin Cities. And if you go to high school, or you went to school at all for any period of time in Minnesota, you were bussed in and saw a show at the Guthrie, because it belongs to the people of that state, right? And I think theaters need to think along the same ways. And part of that is the messaging. And part of that is it's $5, it's $10. And I think if you ask for a little bit, we feel like we've contributed. But that's part of it, is that you have to have a lot of people giving a little bit rather than have it belong to one donor, right? And that's how you build a community. A theater needs to belong to and reflect the community in which it resides, right? So that's kind of my take on that. And part of it is, look, we're lucky because we're outdoor Shakespeare, so we're not paying rent on a huge space. I'm going to throw some shade at institutions, though. We're going to see if I get hired after this. Theaters have done a bad job because they like to invest and endow spaces and not people. And it's the people that make the art, right? But it's much more interesting, or feels of value to someone to endow a space rather than endow someone's position, right?
So
And I think
you're
COVID,
talking more of the educational model where you endow a chair.
you endow a chair. Yeah, and I think theaters can move to that model rather than endowing space. I mean, what COVID taught us was we couldn't be indoors, and how we use space is we haven't been using it to its utmost potential. And not all spaces are created for all people, right? Most spaces are very white leaning. You're not allowed to arrive late. You can't do this, you can't do that. God forbid, don't bring children. Who do you think you are? Pay me a lot of money and come to my theater. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to get hired after this.
Yeah, but then we
But,
got to Saratoga, so you're good.
Great, fabulous. I sound like some weird hippie Joe Pap Shakespeare free-for-all person, but it's true though. You know, when I talk to a variety of people, museums have been reckoning with this. Like, read the articles, read the research. I think theaters also, like, it's very different for you to come to a Saratoga Shakespeare show, and if your kids get bored, give them a ball and they can go play ball, or hand them a phone. Or if you need to step away for a phone conversation, you do it, and no one's leering at you or looking at you like, how dare you interrupt my theater, right? And part of that comes from, I remember the first time I was at Shakespeare's Globe and I stood in the yard, right? And that is I am not a religious person, I am a spiritual person. And how people talk about their being born again, right? There's my equivalent of that, of standing in the yard, experiencing a show in that way. And I went, yeah, it's rude, it's smelly, it's people are carrying on some conversations and our attention is wrapped, and they have to work a lot harder to keep our attention. And we have to learn to focus through all the distractions. But it just felt much more open and acceptable than being packed into a tiny space, right? And being saying, sit there in your chair and you can't get up and pee until intermission, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And you know, children aren't allowed. And like we have two children.
For a sec though. Again, the conversation we've had, and you don't want to turn off your mature theater goers because they're still the backbone.
Absolutely.
But you must cultivate tomorrow's, today's and tomorrow's. So how do you integrate the stinky with the crowd that's used to?
Yeah. And that's part of.
I know it's a podcast, so I was putting on gloves. You're listening.
Yes.
I'm not watching.
We were all with you 100%. We felt it. You know, that's the hard part, right? Is how do we make it so everyone feels welcome, right? And that's the trick. It's like, you know, some theaters have foregone programs, right? Because they're expensive. Like for Times Fool, they don't, because they know that people want them, right? And it's kind of the cost of doing business. Doing away with that and forcing someone to scan a QR code is not a way to make everyone feel welcome, right? And so I think you have to look at it from all perspectives, right? And so there's simple things that we can do to make space for everybody. And we just have to think about
Saratoga.
Say that again.
I said, so how was your time in Saratoga? And this is a fascinating conversation, Wesley.
Yeah.
And I think at some point, Ellen, you and I are going to have Wesley and a couple of others of the movers and shakers that we talked this through. No, seriously, because this is something Ellen and I were recently in at Proctor's Theater talking with Philip, who is who runs
Philip Morris, yeah.
Right, Philip Morris, and he's an impresario, and he's struggling with bringing people back into the theater as well. Carol Max, who owns a small theater in the Capital Region, Curtain Call. Hers is an older audience, struggling. How do you bring them in? So, okay, everybody, now listen up. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have all these folks on, and we've talked. Ellen and I talked with Philip Morris, as I said recently, about this. So that thought, Wesley.
Yeah, yeah.
So back to Saratoga. How was you
Yeah.
had a fabulous cast.
I had Dreamcast.
Oh, you
I
had Tim Dugan.
The man crush Tim Dugan knows no bounds. I think that Laura and Tim, I've seen a lot of Benedicts and Beatrices, right? I've seen a lot, and I thought what they did was really spectacular. And the sense of play that they brought to it, and the fact that they jumped in with both feet right away. And then, they turn around in these scenes and they're clowning, right? Like that was a thing about them. I'm like, yes, you're playing Benedict and Beatrice, but you just did the whole kill Claudio, eat his heart in the marketplace scene, and now you're these ridiculous clowns. And then you convert back into these other characters again. I mean, I think what they did, I think was just outstanding. And they're two of my favorite actors because of their willingness to jump in and just say yes and do that, right? Because that's not easy.
How did they lure you up here?
What?
How did they lure you?
Many moons ago, I was teaching at UAlbany, and I met Lee Strimbeck for coffee. And Lee said, there's this Shakespeare Company over in Saratoga Springs. You should audition for them. And I said, oh, okay. And so I showed up at the EPA, and they cast me, and I just never left. And it's been a really great artistic home. Larry and Barb opens. For some reason, just kind of let me do my thing, and they were very gracious, very kind, and they're like a set of parents to me. And they just really let me do my thing and grow. And part of it is too, we almost have sort of formed a company in our own way. Like, I do think like the best art is created by ensembles, right? When you look at the plays that have sustained, the Moscow Art Theater, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, the Berliner Ensemble, you look at these dramatists who wrote like these, control so much of our theater, the group, right? The group theater, right? They were doing all the Tennessee Williams plays and Clifford Odets. They were ensembles that worked and played together, and we sort of were developing that with Saratoga Shakes. It's like when the board reached out and said, can you do this? Do you think we can do this? We're emerging from the pandemic. And I was like, yeah. And instantly my brain went, I gotta get Tim and David on board. Right? Like we gotta get the band back together. Like we gotta do this, if we're going to do this and we're going to emerge, it's only going to be with the people that have done it before and done it together as a family. And the board said sure. And I was like, okay. Might get more trouble than it's worth. Careful, the three of us, we can cause a little good trouble. And and we just never left. Like it's been kind of a nice home for all of us in the summers. And we've gone and worked other places and done other things, and it's been great. And Michael Pemberton as Dogberry and Don John. I mean, we are so lucky that he lives in the region now. I think a lot of theaters are going to feel very blessed to have him around. But everybody that was up on that stage, it was really exciting. It was good. I remember being in the rehearsal room and just going, I am so lucky because they're just here to do this thing and I can just get out of their way and let it happen. Right.
Now there's a reason that Shakespeare in particular is always done in the park. Companies all over the place love doing their Shakespeare in the park. So is there either as a director or an actor a way that you approach the material differently, knowing that it's this outdoor theater and, as you said, a lot of times more messy than in something indoor?
Yeah, I mean, like there's tricks I've learned along the way. I mean, I should probably write one of those slim little volumes, like how to be a hack outdoors. But like, there's things you learn. I mean, part of it is like as a director. So I trained at Shakespeare's Globe as a director, right? And that meant I was working in shared light. And I in the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse and on the Globe stage. And so when you're working in those conditions or in those circumstances, it's a very different it's almost this conceit of I see you and you see me, right? And it's very Brechtian. Well, Shakespeare was doing it long before Brecht did, but it's this idea of I'm an actor and I'm playing this role and I'm completely committed to it, and I know that there's an audience there, right? And you have to buy into that as a performer. And if that bothers you or disturbs you, you feel like you need a fourth side, then you shouldn't be doing this work, right? Outdoors. There's like so many little things you learn, like you need to gesture or turn when speaking while mic'd outdoors, or no one can follow who's talking, right? When working in spaces that are thrust or outdoors like that, you have to be careful to not look at the floor, right? What is it? Brendan O'Hay, who directs all the Globe tours and is an associate at the Globe, says Wesley, if you're looking at the ground like this, that's where you expect your career to be, and you have to lift and be open because you're playing in 360, right? You're playing even when you're outdoors. You're generally playing in a deep thrust. It's very rarely a deep proscenium, and so or shallow proscenium, and so there's just like little things you pick up along the way when working outdoors that make it easier. I also warn every actor. I said, I always say it's outdoor Shakespeare. And they go, yeah. I go, have you done outdoor Shakespeare before? And they go, why do you ask? I said, well, it's very sweaty and there's bugs and you are dealing with homeless people or ducks or dogs chasing a Frisbee or kids on bikes. And if you're not able to deal in real time with that, right, and adjust to that or hold for a helicopter going overhead while staying committed to a moment, and you aren't afraid of mosquitoes, then this is for you if you can deal with all those things. But there's a sense of there's a lot of life happening when you're outdoors like that, and I find that exciting as an actor because you don't know what's going to happen next. And not all actors, that's not for everyone. And so that's why I always have to have a little talk of like, have you done this before? Are you sure you want to do this?
It's different, here we've got, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to see, go down to Washington Park for Park Playhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Spend the whole summer, and that's outdoor theater, obviously. And it's the rehearsal time is wonderful because people who normally wouldn't see theater wander through then and have the chance to sit, and they may come time after time and become engaged. It's from that, you talked about religion. That's, I got the t-shirt, so I get it. It's Ellen, looking at the clock, do you want
to do our spotlight?
Yeah,
I love it. I know. See, this is the problem, Wesley. Like, we only have our 40-minute Zoom. We keep our episodes all around 30 minutes. So we, oh my gosh, we need to have you back to talk more about all this stuff. But we do like to end with a segment called the close-up, which is all about you. So it's just some rapid fire questions. Are you ready for your close-up, Wesley?
Oh golly, I'm afraid.
It's nothing to be afraid of. First one's nice and easy.
Okay.
What was the moment in your life where you just knew, I have to do theater? This is for me.
It was when I was theater is a land of misfit toys, and being backstage as a young person and working with professionals, and the fact that we get to play all day. In my undergrad, we had a summer theater called Iowa Summer Repertory, and it was graduate students and professional actors from New York and directors. We would do 3 plays in rep and 2 readings by a living American playwright. And it was while working there as a young lad that I said, this is amazing. Like, I don't ever want to leave. It was like I'd found like I'd come home. So that was that moment. Yeah.
Is there a certain play or production that had a huge impact on you?
Theater for the Deaf West Big River. Did you guys ever see it? No. There's this, it's amazing what they did, but there's that moment in Waiting for the Light to Shine, right? They bring the whole, the musical Big River, right?
I'm actually not familiar with that.
Oh my gosh, it's Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. It's amazing, right? But there's this moment where they're doing the song Waiting for the Light to Shine, and it's the big moment where the whole chorus is out. And it taught me a lesson, the power, I'm hairs on my arm already, but the power of silence. And it's everybody's waiting for the light to, and then hit the big last, like, a bit of the song. and it was dead silence in the theater, and they signed it. And I remember, like right now, I'm overcome, right? I got like the hairs on my arms, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like this, the feelings I'm feeling, I can't describe, I can't articulate. And it's only happening because I'm here, right? And it's moving the air in front of me. And the power of silence, or the power of taking some, it was just so, yeah. And if you don't know Big River, go listen to it. It's super fun. But that moment was really transformative for me as a theater maker. Yeah.
And since you're a Shakespeare guy, what's your favorite Shakespeare and why?
That I've seen or that I've read?
Oh, seen.
Ooh. I'm gonna, oh my God, everyone at the Globe will throw me on a pyre and burn me alive. The most recent one that was most fun, it's a tie between Emma Rice's Midsummer that was at the Globe. I thought it was so inventive. They gender bent Helena to Helenus. They had a burlesque performer playing Titania. Like it was just, they had a young, fun bottom. Like it was just all across the board. It was super accessible. It was approachable. The music in it was fantastic. It was everything you want a Midsummer Night's Dream to be. I think that was probably the most coolest recent one that I would seen. That was a couple years back that I was like, this is awesome.
And is there a play out there that you want to get your hands on, either as an actor or director, that you think I gotta work on this one?
Yeah. No, totally. Well, I'm getting that gift this spring. I believe I'm directing Sense and Sensibility at Central Connecticut. I love that play. I remember seeing it at Hudson Gym in New York. I had a couple of friends in it, and I'm a big Kate Hamill fan. And I really think that first play of hers is a real a gem, and just really super fun and highly theatrical. And it's something that I'm looking to jump into with a group of people. That'll be super fun. Yeah, I've been waiting for that one for a while. When I saw it, I went, ooh, I want to be in the room with this play, right? And so that's going to finally happen this spring. So that'll be fun.
You know, Benita, I need to reach out again. I went to college with Kate Hamill, and we need to get her on the podcast. We need to. She does such great work.
Okay.
Awesome.
On the list. I'll reach out. You know.
And lastly, what's if you had some words of wisdom to pass on to people new in the theater, what's your big advice?
Worry about making the art. Seriously, I see young, when I was a wee lad, we just made art. We didn't think about making a living, but we did. Does that make sense? And I had many adventures, and be aware and be humbled by the impact that art can have on people. Right? I toured when I was young with Montana Shakespeare in the parks, and art mattered. Art matters to those folks. You pull up in the middle of nowhere, you put a stage up, and you do 2 plays in rep, and 1,000 people show up, and they're hungry, and they're grateful, and they're engaged, and they have a great time. And I've discovered that then, you go back to New York and you go, wow, the average Montanan has probably seen more Shakespeare than the average New Yorker. And going to the theater matters more to the average Montanan.
And maybe now more than ever before, Wesley.
This has been fantastic chat, Wesley. This is wonderful. Yeah. So Benita, let's look at our calendars when we can get him back on to talk about.
Right. When you run for the next show ends in between shows.
Oh my golly.
But yeah, this was way too fast. Wesley, what a delight. And I know Ellen was really busy, and then I was out of town and didn't get to see. I thought I was going to get up. I didn't. I'm telling
Tim Dugan. I'm telling Tim.
I know. He and I acted together many years ago before he became Tim Dugan. But we did As Bees and Honey Drown.
No joke.
Yeah.
Nice.
I was Alexa, and he was the young.
Yeah, Tim. Who doesn't have a man crush on Tim?
Right. Or yeah, exactly.
Or a crush on Tim.
Exactly. I knew then that he was going to. But so very sorry. It's just I was doing Mrs. Maisel. I was out of town. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's awesome! Yay!
So yeah.
Oh, there's no.
Do I get excused for that?
Yeah. Yeah, you are forgiven. No worries. No worries.
But I see the less than 1 minute, which means it's going to dump on us when we don't expect it. Wesley Broulik, man about town, Shakespeare connoisseur and embraceable for the audience. How's that?
Nice. It's been a pleasure, you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks
Thank you.
everybody for listening. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. We'll see you next time. Go see theater, make theater, be everything theater.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time. It's everything, everything, everything.